Hey, welcome back to Love Wins. Welcome back to a brand new series called If You've Left Church, Don't Go Back, dot, dot, dot. There is a rest of that title that we will get to as the series unfolds. I don't know if you're ready for this series. I don't know if I'm ready for this series, but we're going to take an honest and serious look at what it means to go to church, to not go to church, what the church is, what the church isn't, what God thinks of the church, etc., etc. To start this series, I'm going to read from the first chapter of Isaiah. I'm going to read it from the Message because it's modern English and it flows. I don't know if you're familiar with this chapter. If you're not, you're going to be shocked. All right, here we go. The vision that Isaiah, son of Amoz, saw regarding Judah and Jerusalem during the times of the kings of Judah, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Heaven and earth, you are the jury. Listen to God's case. I had children, and I raised them well, and they turned on me. The ox knows who's boss, the mule knows the hand that feeds him, but not Israel. My people don't know up from down. Shame, misguided God dropouts, staggering under their guilt baggage, villainous gang, band of vandals. My people have walked out on me, their God, turned their backs on the Holy One of Israel, walked off and never looked back. Why bother even trying to do anything with you when you just keep to your bullheaded ways? You keep beating your heads against brick walls. Everything within you protests against you. From the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, nothing is working right. Wounds and bruises and running sores, untended, unwashed, unbandaged. Your country is laid waste. Your cities burned down. Your land is destroyed by outsiders while you watch, reduced to stubble by barbarians. Daughter Zion is deserted like a tumble-down shack on a dead-end street, like a tar paper shanty on the wrong side of the tracks, like a sinking ship abandoned by the rats. If God of the angel armies hadn't left us a few survivors, we'd be as desolate as Sodom, doomed just like Gomorrah. Listen to my message, you Sodom-schooled leaders. Receive God's revelation, you Gomorrah-schooled people. Why this frenzy of sacrifices, God's asking? Don't you think I've had my fill of burnt sacrifices, rams and plump grain-fed calves? Don't you think I've had my fill of blood from bulls and lambs, goats? And when you come before me, whoever gave you the idea of acting like this? Running here and there, doing this and that, all this sheer commotion in the place provided for worship. Quit your worship charades. I can't stand your trivial religious games. Monthly conferences, weekly Sabbaths, special meetings, meetings. I can't stand one more. Meetings for this, meetings for that. I hate them. You've worn me out. I'm sick of your religion, while you go right on sinning. When you put on your next prayer performance, I'll be looking the other way. No matter how long or loud or often you pray, I'll not be listening. And do you know why? Because you've been tearing people to pieces, and your hands are bloody. Go home and wash up. Clean up your act. Sweep your lives clean of your evil doings, so I don't have to look at them any longer. Say no to wrong. Learn to do good. Help the down and out. Stand up for the homeless. Go to bat for the defenseless. Come, sit down. Let's argue this out. This is God's message. If your sins are blood red, they'll be snow white. If they're red like crimson, they'll be like wool. If you'll willingly obey, you'll feast like kings. But if you're willful and stubborn, you'll die like dogs. That's right, God says so. Oh, can you believe it? The chaste city has become a whore. She was once all justice, everyone living as good neighbors. And now they're all at one another's throats. Your coins are counterfeits, Your wine is watered down. Your leaders are turncoats who keep company with crooks. They sell themselves to the highest bidder and grab anything not nailed down. They never stand up for the homeless. They never stick up for the defenseless. I read that to make one point clear. Sometimes, depending on how the church is doing, God hates church. God hates church sometimes. You'll notice that the reading began with specifying under which kings of Israel this criticism was given, because the church isn't always in the same condition. In fact, in the reading, it talked about how it used to be versus how it is, and then how he desires it would be or should be. If you've left church, don't go back. ... There are many reasons why people leave. If you've left, you have your reasons. They may be your own issues. It might not have anything to do with the church. Maybe you weren't sure if you believed anymore, or maybe you wanted to do things that you thought were against what the church wanted. Maybe you just wanted to be free. Maybe you wanted to experiment. But maybe it was because the church didn't feel like it had anything to do with God. There are many, many reasons why people leave. There are also some who are still there. You may be one of these. You're in the church because you believe it's where you ought to be, but you know full well the church isn't where it ought to be. What to do? So, full disclosure, I'm a pastor. So, my success is measured by how many people come to church. Whether that should be, it's the way it is. Anyone who asks me what I do, the next question they ask is, oh, how big is your church? But I don't measure my church that way. I've never measured any of my churches that way. I would rather have 5 people who love God and love others than 500 people who are just coming because it's the thing to do. As I read that passage, if you weren't familiar with it, you would swear from the first part that these people have outright rebelled and they have nothing to do with God or church or religion or anything. But then as you read on, you find out, hey, wait a minute, these people are offering sacrifices, they're having meetings and extra meetings and super religious. And God hates it. And then he goes on to define, repeatedly actually, what he envisions for his people, how he wants his people to be. He reminisces back to a time where justice was the norm, where people were good neighbors. And then he goes on to say, I want you to be people who defend the downcast, who stand up for the defenseless, who use whatever power, position, finances, privilege that you have to make life better for those who don't have. The reason why that's significant is because most churches of any denomination, that's not what they talk about as important. Many argue over doctrine, what we teach, what we believe. But very few measure their success by how they're treating the least of these. Some people, when I shared what my title of my series was going to be, they thought it was clickbait. You can call it that if you wish. I'm not definitely not bait and switch. Here's what the full title is. If you've left church, don't go back, go forward. If you've left for your own reasons, gave in to temptation, fell off the wagon, however you want to express that reason for leaving, don't go back, go forward. If you left the church because it was a mess and it didn't reflect what you believe God wanted at all, don't go back, go forward. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like? How do I do that? I'm going to be more honest in this video than some people would prefer that I would be, with this caveat. When Jesus was here, the church was evil to the core. So evil that they tried multiple times to kill him, eventually did, and had no bones about doing illegal, underhanded, despicable things to justify and support their own cause and their own turf. And yet Jesus went to the synagogue every single Sabbath. If you take from this series that I'm telling you to leave the church, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm also not telling you to blindly go to church. It would be really simple if I could flatly state one or the other. But it's more complicated than that. There are churches that are far more healthy than others. And you may live somewhere where you're more remote and your options are few, and the options you have are varying from bad to worse. If that's the case, and if you've put an honest effort to help the church become healthier and it's not working, you have permission from Jesus to leave. Jesus told his disciples when they went into a village, he said, if they don't listen to you, kick the dust off your sandals and keep going. Because when we invest all kinds of time and energy on one group of people who aren't changing and have no intentions of changing, not only are you wasting your time and your emotions and your energy, you're also robbing others who might be willing to listen of your influence. I would say that if you live somewhere where you don't see any options for joining an organized community of believers, start one in your home. Invite your neighbors. Invite your friends. Invite your coworkers. Use your home as a base of operations to accomplish two things. Number one, it is important to know who the God is that you're following and serving. So Bible study, doctrine, truth, that matters. But doesn't matter more than how we treat each other. One should naturally produce the other. If we're serving God, our desire for him will increase. If we're loving God, our desire to serve will increase. It should just naturally flow one into the other and create this healthy synergy. When Jesus was asked what's the most important commandment, he stated the synergy. He said, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love each other. That's a healthy community of believers. Church is not a bad thing. It's not a man-made idea even. If you read the New Testament, you will find that Jesus not only went to church, but he designed for his followers to be part of a community of believers. Following Jesus means living in community with other people who are doing the same thing. There is no biblical model for doing it on your own. But there's also no biblical model for sticking it out in a group of people who have nothing to do with God, even though they might put on a good show. You need to know the situation that you're in. You need to pray for wisdom to know when to try to make the community that's there healthier and when to leave and start a new one. You need to know that it's not my personality even to be splitting, to be leaving. Like, that's not even how I think or act. But I recognize on a very practical level and a very biblical level that there are times where you need to kick the dust off your feet and keep on going. In addition, if you are part of a church, whatever degree of healthy or unhealthy it may be, there is a power in small groups that just doesn't exist in church the way it's currently done. And because I don't have the power or the influence to change how church is done, I can only work within what is and try and move it to a healthier place. So for example, in my church here, which I would say is healthier than most, we recognize that the church service itself is more of an audience presenter format than it is a community. And because many are comfortable with that, if you just wholesale change it, you're violating what people value, and it's complicated. It's messy. So rather than fighting against what is, we've decided to work with what is and expand from there. So the first thing we did is we have lunch every week right after the service for visitors. That way, people can actually sit down, share a meal, have a conversation, and build actual community. The second thing we've done, which is more recent, is we've started small groups so that during the week, anyone who chooses to belong to one can join a small group where people get to actually know each other on a much more intimate level. And the next plan of that phase is to get all of those groups involved in some kind of their own service within the community. Because that's what God designed us for. The world teaches us to feed ourselves, to please ourselves, to go after what we want. We are in the I generation. But fulfillment, joy, contentment, purpose, meaning, those big things that everybody is after, they don't come from pursuing ourselves. They come from loving and serving others. That's what the church is meant to be. And when the church becomes religious, but not loving, God hates it. He hates it so much that he wrote it down for us to read about. And that church that he talked about in Isaiah chapter 1 eventually did fly to pieces. In our next episode, I'm going to take you on a journey of discovering how and why the church gets to these dark places and what we can do about it. We'll see you next time.